So Unit 4, Physiology, and Activity 1, Muscular Contraction. So for some of you, you've been waiting for this kind of thing to be the focus of our course, and for others, you may wish it went back to the history of sport or the sociology. That's the great thing about this kinesiology program, or if you take kinesiology in university, is there's a whole bunch of different directions that you can take your learning. So if there's an area that you prefer over another, then you can head in that direction. So it's not just focused on sort of one area. There's many different components and facets to kinesiology. So in this case, looking at muscular contraction. So this unit here is going to take you through a whole bunch of different details about muscles and the fact that they cause movements and those types of things. So a few videos in here sort of to take a look, looking for some biomechanics issues and some of the moving images in this video. It's important that things work sort of in opposites in order for things to work properly. The structure of the skeletal muscle, something we'll take a look at here. So we have our muscle, and then the muscle is broken down into some smaller pieces, and then those smaller pieces are broken down even further. So it's important to make sure you have a good idea of the muscle itself and all the different little components that actually go together to make up the larger muscle itself and to be able to perform the work that it does. When here you're basically going to complete skeletal structure, the skeletal muscle quiz at the end of this, and then submit that to the Dropbox. So again, working with a bunch of quizzes again, instead of, let's say, for example, your opinions, where you could do that in the sociology and the history of sport. In this case, it's specific to the details around the science. So here we're taking a look again at a muscle and how it's going to contract. So this is a bunch of information about the whole process and how the message gets sent to the muscle and it reaches the right locations, and then the muscles are activated. So it's going to talk about the different things in here, like motor neurons, talk about the cell body and the axon and the fibers it stimulates. So working its way through. This interactive here will help you out with giving you information about each part of the motor neuron does, what its function is, and how this all plays out and how this all works. Some of this information is important for the final exam, as will be a question related to this on the final exam. So again, going through, talking about all the different components and sort of how it works and giving you some other things to compare it to. So again, some of you are going to love this, and others you'll be like, oh my goodness. But that's okay. That's just the way it is in the course. Some things will be a real interest to you and some might not be. The final piece is the muscle contraction. So it goes here in terms of muscles and different component pieces to it and the different types of muscle. What you need to really focus on are the prime movers or the agonists, like which ones are responsible for generating specific movement, the antagonists, which are the opposites. And this diagram here is good. It shows you the opposite. So if we didn't have opposite or antagonistic muscle groups, then when you contracted one muscle, potentially your body could stay in that position because you got nothing to pull it back in the other direction. So we need to have antagonist muscle groups within the body in order to keep things working the way they do, so that we can work efficiently and function properly. There's also stabilators or fixators, and these work to stabilize different parts of the body. Many of you identified the shoulder, for example, being great because of its range of motion flexibility, but also being quite vulnerable because of that great range of motion and flexibility. So in this case, we've got muscles. So for example, the deltoids, they stabilize the shoulder, let's say during a bench press or a push-up. All right, so stabilizers or fixators, their job is to keep the body stable. And when these muscles sort of haven't been activated, so if you step on, let's say, a balance board or using a BOSU ball or an exercise ball, that's when you figure out whether your stabilizers are effective or have been trained properly, because that's when you get the wobbles and the wiggles. And then once you've got them trained properly, those wobbles and wiggles will disappear. Then, of course, there's sometimes synergists. So these are muscles that will help perform an exercise or motion. And in this case, again, the push-up or bench press. Your pectoral muscles are the major ones, all right, in terms of getting this done. So they're the agonist, but then your synergists are the triceps, because the triceps also help to perform the movement. So with that information, you can then go and try and complete this muscular system crossword, all right, so for review. And then following that, there's an assignment here where you're going to talk about, in this case, what's required in order to pick up this glass of water to drink. So you've got flexion of the arm at the elbow. So you need to figure out what the prime movers and agonists are, what the antagonists are, what your stabilizers and fixators are doing, and what the synergists are doing. And so that'll be submitted to this assignment Dropbox right here. And then here it's going to go to time to contract. So it's going into first year anatomy. So it's your muscles and muscle cells. And this, again, this information right here, pretty important for the final exam, because this stuff is going to be part of the final exam. Is a question that relates specifically to this and how this whole process works. So be sure to make sure you know this. And of course, there's a quiz to complete at the end of that. And at the end, there's a final quiz on the sliding filament theory right here. And this is the theory we figure It's how the muscle fibers themselves are able to pull against each other to cause muscles to contract, so to shorten, and then release to allow muscles to lengthen. One piece I want to mention here is the idea that a muscle fiber will contract completely or it will not contract at all. So keep that in mind. So the muscle is made up of a whole bunch of different muscle fibers. The first time we do something, we often over-recruit muscle fibers, so too many. So when you're learning a new dance, usually it looks pretty funky because we're recruiting muscle fibers and things we don't need. The body wants to be as efficient as possible. It will figure out which muscle fibers it needs to contract, get the job done. So for most people, lifting a light weight in the bench press, it's a movement you've all done, or sorry, not the bench press, but that's the bicep curl. It's a movement you've all done. So the bicep will only recruit just enough fibers so that it can complete that exercise. And in order for us to then make it recruit more, we have to increase the weight so that it has to recruit more fibers. But that's just something to think about, is that a muscle fiber will contract fully or it won't contract at all. There is no half contraction. It's either a full explosion or no explosion. And the body adjusts by the number of fibers it recruits, all right, in order to determine how much strength and how much power it's actually then exerting.